Hello and welcome to the latest instalment of Extraordinary, where I speak to ordinary people with extraordinary outlooks on life. And it's mostly people I know or I've bumped into. It's even members of my own entertaining family. Every now and then, Ed Stoppard, the actor, sprinkles some fairy dust and we speak to a celebrity of sorts about their hidden passion. This week, I speak to John Park. I first met John outside the lavatories of the old Riverside Studios just before a press night of a play I had written. It got mostly pummeled, but John, who was writing for his website, Fringe Report, liked it. I then became friends with John, and I was fascinated by this man's determination to cover fringe theatre. This was in the early 2000s, when no one was covering what was happening on the Fringe. Fringe Report ran for 10 years between 2002 and 2012, and it's all gone now. So I wanted to use this podcast as an opportunity to solidify in digital resin the extraordinary thing that was Fringe Report. Over to John. Hello, John.
Hello, Marcus.
Thank you for joining me on my podcast.
It's a privilege and a pleasure.
Now, John, I really brought you onto this podcast to discuss the extensive work that you put into Fringe Report, which was something that I came across when I was reviewed by Fringe Report back in 2004, and then took an interest in your work. What was Fringe Report, John?
I think it was set out, well, we chose the name Report because we wanted to report on what was happening in this absolutely amazing area of theatre, which hadn't been very well documented. I mean, it's existed for a long time, Fringe theatre, certainly since the 50s and before. But it's only, well, if you try Googling it, you'll see it's very sporadically covered over those years. And we wanted to do a kind of a concrete record, really, of what was happening at all these amazing theatres.
Was it predominantly focused in London?
Initially, we started by reviewing shows in London. Well, in fact, no, that isn't true. We started on the 12th of July in 2002, which, as a lot of listeners will know, is just before the Edinburgh Fringe. And we did start with that in mind and reviewed 50 shows at that Edinburgh Fringe and then subsequent ones. But almost immediately, we kind of started becoming more national and international, reviewing some of the fringes around the UK. But we ended up actually having writers all over the world. I mean, we had them in London, obviously, New York, Dublin, Denver, Colorado, Edinburgh, Dallas, Texas, Northeast England, and one in Hawaii as well.
To put things into context, how many? I mean, Fringe is the Fringe theatre scene is huge, isn't it?
Yes, it is enormous.
And how many, in that 10-year period, it was roughly a 10-year period, wasn't it, that you ran Fringe Report?
Yes, well, it was 10 years. Yeah.
How many shows were reviewed or reported on?
We were doing about two to three items a week, all the year round in London. That's what we aim for. And we tried to cover, obviously, regional ones as well. I don't know really how many. I'm just guessing on the top of my head. What's that? 2,000, 3,000? I don't know. Shows
it was about that, 2,000 or 3,000.
Yeah.
Incredible, really. What was the ignition that made you decide to do something like this at that point in your life?
Well, if you want the longest story, it's to do with swimming, actually, because I don't know, when you swim, do you put your head underwater?
It's a good question. I swim a lot when I'm on holiday, and over the years, when I do breaststroke predominantly, I developed a style that put my head under the water because my neck was beginning to ache.
Yes.
And when I do front crawl now, of course, you have to put your head in the water and breathe every 2 or 3 strokes to one side.
But do you breathe out when your head is underwater?
When my head is underwater, I breathe out.
Oh, good. No, this is the thing. See, that's the thing I'd never mastered. And there was some guy in Cannes, I think it was, a very elderly gent, who he worked out a system for teaching children, adults, anybody who was afraid. he'd get a big, deep soup bowl, fill it with water, put it in their hands, and then ask them to lift it up and put their face into it and breathe out into it, so that they had complete control over the water. So I used to go to Marshall Street baths because we were nearby there, and that's just off Carnaby Street. And I was beginning to teach myself, and finally did, how to stick my head underwater when I was swimming. And one day when I came out, there was a little sign, little flyer in the rack of flyers, and it said, would you like to write a radio play? So I got together with a mate who I used to edit a comic radio. I wouldn't dare to call it a magazine at college, at architecture college. And we wrote a couple of plays. And after the first year, we kind of got, I think they said, do another one next year. And
this is way back.
No, it's just before Fringe Report.
Oh.
Anyhow, we won the first prize, that's the point. So we got an award for that. And somebody then said, well, that was a radio play. Why don't you do a theatre version? And I hated theatre. I'd been to see Hello, Hello at the Palladium, I think in the time since I left school. And Shakespeare really did actually turn me off completely. But I went on this playwriting course at the City Lit, and through that, there were really nice people on the course, and the course was absolutely brilliant. There was an open. The BBC News Headlines, the producer of that, used to hold an open meeting. Anyone could turn up at Broadcasting House on this particular day each week and talk, listen really to what the briefing was, come up with jokes and all that kind of thing. And through that, someone said, why don't you write for News Review? I didn't know what News Review was. So I ended up going to see Emma Taylor at the Canal Cafe, who ran News Review, and she signed me up to write for News Review, which I did on and off. Wonderful, great fun. And she said, we do theatre here. And she had a play on called American Trio. It was actually 3 plays. And it's actually with these 3 plays that Fringe Report started. They were by kind of very well-known, kind of rather offbeat American writers. One of them was a play called Sure Thing by David Ives. And I saw it twice. The second time I saw it, it was Nick Cordron and Katie Bartrop were the actors. And then a very amazing short play called The Philadelphia, also by David Ives. And I think that had Tom Badell, Sarah Sylvester, and Alex Dower in it. But one of the ones that I really remember, and this is in February 2002, was The Battle of Bull Run Always Makes Me Cry, by a remarkable writer, Carol Real, I think she's probably pronounced Real. In that had Emma Taylor, Nick Cordron, Sarah Sylvester, and Katie Bartrop in it. And the 3 were directed by Nick Cordron and Emma Taylor. And the technical director was Jake Wiltshire, really amazing technical director, by the way, and amazing directors. Well, I just sat up. I couldn't believe it. It was absolutely incredible. This was February 2002.
So you had a theatrical awakening.
It was a revelation, and also starting to write for News Review from the inside.
John, I can't believe up until 2002 you'd only seen Hello, Hello.
No, actually, I'm totally lying, because the apocalypse, rather than the revelation, was that on this same theatre writing course at the City Lit, there were lovely people. We had a great deal of fun. We used to go to the theatres together, and I went to see a production of Rita Sue and Bob 2 by Max Stafford Clark, who'd originally commissioned it, and it was on also with a short play called The Estate, The Estate We're In, which was a kind of it was an anniversary of the writing of the play. And the estate we're in looked at the estate on which the woman who wrote Rita Sue and Bob 2 was there. And it starts with, are we allowed to say fuck on this?
Yeah.
Fine, okay. There's no really other word. It starts with a kind of very arresting scene of a man and a woman fucking in the back of a car.
They made it into a film, didn't they?
It was a film, but I think I had 2 revelations from Max Stafford Clark. One was seeing Rita Sue and Bob 2, and I thought, gosh, if this is what theatre is about. And then I saw the 3 things that I just mentioned, the American Trio.
So it was like a midlife awakening.
Well,
I just assumed you were, for me, you were the John Park now that you were maybe when you were in your 20s.
no, I was a total ignoramus, really, so far as theatre was concerned. Also,
I can't believe that.
I had a very definite, the word, who was the guy who said, was it Goebbels who said, when I hear the word culture, I reach for my revolver. I,
I didn't think I'd ever make a podcast where Goebbels would be quoted.
well, let's say it was, I don't know, somebody from the modern age, but it would have been a sawn-off shotgun, being the 90s. No, it was great.
So Matt Stafford Clark, that City Lit college, this introduction to theatre was, I mean, it is, I had my theatre awakening when I was 14, when I was cast as the maniac in a school play, Accidental Death of an Anarchist by Dario Fo.
Yeah.
And because my teacher then, a man called Stephen Ayano, was half Italian, I believe, and was really ahead of the curve. And I think they'd just done Accidental Death of an Anarchist at the National Theatre. And I had, I'm 14 years of age. I'm really very young when it comes to understanding what theatre is. But that was my awakening at 14, playing that part. And it gave me a taste for theatre ever since. I find it incredible that you had this incredible awakening midlife, and then it feels as if Fringe Report was like an odyssey of sorts for you.
Well, I don't think the Odyssey ended very well, did it? I can't remember. My Greek history is not very good.
No, I think
it was Jason, wasn't it?
No, Odysseus.
Oh,
he gets back.
Oh yes, hence the title name.
Yeah, he makes it.
I don't really like this analogy, but go on. Yes.
No, but I do. I think it's a 10-year odyssey as well, which mirrors your 10-year odyssey with Fringe Report. But I'm in full admiration of Fringe Report. I was passionate about what you were trying to do because it really gave a voice to everybody, didn't it? That was kind of the underlying spirit of how you were reporting the Fringe.
Yes, that was very much it. The reason I mentioned, incidentally, American Trio in February was that in the February of that year was that this is, I suppose, the kind of the other revelation about the Fringe. I said to her, I've just seen the most amazing piece of West End theatre that you lot have done. It's absolutely staggering. And there were 3 people in the audience, I think, or 5. Is that typical? And she said, well, yes, it is, rather. And you remember this, but 2002, the internet had been going for, 5-10 years or something like that. But nobody actually used it in the way that we use it now. It wasn't a dependency thing. And I just happened to know how to write very basic HTML. So I said, okay, right, what we'll do is, there's an all-night internet place in Victoria, there was then. I'll go down and write a review. So I went down and wrote a review of this thing. This is before Fringe Report started. And a ticketing agency picked up the review. And that really was the kind of ignition for Fringe Report. We started formally in July. And what I wanted to do from the beginning, I'm saying but actually there were a lot of people who we were discussing all together about this, and who continued to be marvellously involved with Fringe Report. And I'm thinking really of guys like, I guess, Mark Blakewell and James Harris, comedy writers, because they were doing absolutely amazing stuff at Madame Jojo's comedy nights. And I'm thinking of guys like Nick Watson, who was the most amazing technical director, David Wybrow, who was revolutionary man. He's still there, thank heavens. Dave was he was the manager of the Cockpit Theatre, and he was running a remarkable night called Theatre in the Pound, which I hope is still going.
I remember you telling me about this.
Now, this is stunning. So everyone in the audience and everyone in the cast paid £1, and I think this is still the case, and you get 20 minutes of play time, time for a play, and you can do a short play or you can do a segment or whatever. And it's a very beautiful theatre. It's stunning. It can do in the round and it can do all the variations of that. So there was David doing that, and also Pete Smith, who was a graduate of the Royal Academy of Music in harpsichord, who decided instead to play piano at Canal Cafe behind the performers and news review. So all of us really were talking about this idea of doing something. And then eventually I just said, okay, I talked to Rohan Acharya. Rohan ran the Canal Cafe Theatre and was followed by Emma Taylor. And Rohan is now obviously a very eminent guy in TV. And Rohan and I we came back from the canal one evening and we sat on Hammersmith Station or bench near there. And we just said, well, come on, let's do it. So the next day I bought the site, and the next night the site was online. But the reason I'm mentioning these people is that it's like, well, you know how it is, Marcus. There's a confluence of people who are all around at the same time, or who are thinking it would be a really great idea if what, in this case, Fringe Theatre, if it could be properly reported and brought to the public. Confluence of that with the internet actually beginning to become used, and of course free, so you weren't bound by the constraints of print. And then it usually takes one person to get down and physically do it, if you see what I mean. But the fact that I was actually the person who did that, the people I've mentioned and many, many, many others all totally became part of Fringe Report, and they were organising terrific events and opportunities for people in the Fringe. And also they were incredibly helpful in kind of easing the way all the way through, as was the Edinburgh Fringe office.
I mean, it was a remarkable operation, and you did it on a shoestring, right?
We did it on nothing at all, and then
not even a shoestring.
No, there wasn't a shoestring involved. No, no, nothing so exotic really. But what happened was that we had three incredibly kind people. I won't mention their names as they don't like to be mentioned. Our reviewers, for example, they were paying their own fares to go and see shows, and they were donating their time very kindly. The costs of actually running the site were minimal. It was just web space and keeping up that subscription each year, which is not large. But things like doing the awards involved physical amounts of money. And Emma Taylor gave us her theatre for 5 years. And then Martin Witts and Leslie Ackland, the Canal Cafe Theatre, that is. And then for the next 5 years, Martin Witts and Leslie Ackland, who owned the Leicester Square Theatre, gave us their theatre. Now, what those people are doing by giving us their theatres for the night is a colossal amount of money. I mean, people who run theatres know exactly what expenses are involved in this, staff and everything. So the donation of that, and then we had three absolutely wonderful donors who very kindly gave us the money to cover the physical costs of doing the awards. Like the awards were a certificate, a bottle of champagne, bottle of very nice champagne, and just the cost of that and the cost of providing drinks at the reception for the awards and so on. So those were very kind people who did that, and the rest of the costs were borne by the people who were actually making it. So although things appear to cost nothing, they kind of do in a way when the load is spread around. Yes,
you do have costs. There's nothing without costs. And what happened to Fringe Report? Because it came to an end, didn't it? After 10 years.
Yeah, it was
all those reports, 2,000 to 3,000 reports on everything, ranging from obviously theatre, there was dance, comedy. It was the whole range of Fringe theatre, wasn't it?
Oh yes, and much more. It was right across the arts. We were doing book reviews as well, and we were doing art galleries. We were doing absolutely what we said is anything that happens in front of the public, really, that is a performance, is fine.
And it was an incredible. I was very sad when it ended because it meant you had to switch off the website. So suddenly, all these reports, it all disappeared. Is that right?
Well, in a sense, yes, but in a way, no. God, it sounds really real politicians reply that one. When we started, I mean, there wasn't really any other organisation doing this, and then the 10 years from 2002 to 2012 also paralleled, obviously, the rise in the overwhelming rise of the internet and the creation of social media. So it became totally different. And there were millions and millions, well, actually about sort of 10 websites regularly reporting theatre and bloggers and so on. So the need for a Fringe Report really had stopped by then, because from being not reported, it is overwhelmingly reported.
Got it.
And I think that with Ideas. Well, I mean, you, of course, Marcus, are an incredible filmmaker. I'm thinking Papadopoulos and Sons, obviously, and The Last Temptation of Chris.
You can stop there, John.
There are many, many more, and there will be many more to come. But God, I've totally lost the thread. What were we talking about?
We're talking about the
I was so overwhelmed with praise for you.
You lost yourself at praising me.
I did. Yeah, it happens all the time. Though.
You were talking about that the need was not there anymore for Fringe Report because the other bloggers had jumped on. There were lots of other websites. So at the very beginning of Fringe Report's journey, you were the only people doing it, and the Fringe desperately needed a voice, and you were that voice. But after 10 years, there were other websites doing it, social media was doing it, and therefore the need for Fringe Report was no longer there.
That was actually just a test to make sure you've been listening.
I thought I did. I thought I passed.
You did it better than me.
I think that's an alpha. I think I get alpha for that. A++, John.
Right. Okay. Now, so 10 years.
Shall I carry on?
Yes. Please. I'll praise you in a moment. If we've got about an hour left. Okay. So the 10 years and the rise of the internet, but also, I mean, frankly, and I think, people who are listening to this will also be creative people, I think, or maybe not, or creative in a different way. One of the crucial things about Fringe Report, certainly looking at our writers and so on, is that the understanding that everyone in the country, everyone in the world really is creative. And when people say, "Oh, I'm not creative, I do a really boring job," actually, what people may think of as a really boring job requires an immense amount of creativity. But also, if you think of how we are at work in any kind of job at all, we change our voice according to who we're talking to, and we have different acting profiles for the day. We act a certain part at work. We act a certain part at home. We don't call it acting. We call it, being sensitive to other people. But the creative spirit is absolutely within all of us. Well, anyone who works in a hospital, who works in a care home, who works in business, who works in theatre or whatever, knows that if you're doing a particular project which requires a lot of focus, there's a time limit. So 10 years seemed good. That's as much as people could put energy into. So we finished on the dot on the day that we had started, if you see what I mean.
And did you not get all the reports?
Technically, by the way, we should have finished on the 11th of July, of course, having started on the 12th. But we thought that was splitting hairs.
No, but all of these reports were bound in books and are now in the British Library, right?
Well, that's a generous statement, but an overwhelmingly inaccurate one.
My research has failed.
If you've ever tried, and anyone listening, please support me in this. If you've ever tried actually putting computer files into typesetting them as a book and collating them, bearing in mind there's quite a few thousand of them, it is just actually getting them in sequence is a monumental endeavor. So what we've achieved so far is the very first book, which would be, I'm just trying to remember, I think it's 2002 to 2003 is the first volume, is indeed bound as a big, thick A4 book.
Wow.
That's in the British Library.
Wow.
And
I'm going to go look it up.
Well, it's there. There's only one, rather like.
Did you only get to 2003?
Well, no, but it's such a what I worked out. Well, I sat down with Richard Dragon, the designer who designed all the Fringe Report awards. We worked out that we're going to have to be about 13 books.
And these would be big, thick books.
Yeah, exactly. Oh. Which are kind of like, it's a lifetime. I could manage one a year, but then the next one I thought, right, we'll do all of the awards because that actually is interesting to people.
People who won awards.
Well, it's interesting to other people as well because I think it does give a very good snapshot of the Fringe over the 10 years. And there's
the awards are once a year, big theatre.
Yeah.
That's what you were talking about earlier, champagne, prizes and awards and receptions. Yeah. And it brought a lot of people together. I went to a few and they were really incredible. They had an amazing energy because it was as awards go, the diversity of the acts there was insane. And it just had a kind of rebellious, irreverent energy, the Fringe Report. That's how it felt to me when I from a participant. It felt very, very. Well, first it felt casual. It felt free, and it felt fun. And it had that what all good art has, that kind of rebellious streak running through it. Is that fair to say? Or maybe you don't recognize it as that.
I think so. The well, it's nice you just put it like that. Sorry, if I may just finish that. So
Sorry.
all of the awards, I think they're 25 a year, and 10 years of them, they're in a book at the British Library. And yes, the rest of the years will get done, but so far there are 2 volumes rather than all of them. With when we started in the July of 2002, I spoke with the Edinburgh Fringe press office, who were immensely kind. And I explained that they were setting up this website, and would they be kind enough to give a press pass, which they did. Otherwise, it would have been unaffordable. And I said, well, it will be me reviewing this time. I will review 50 shows. Now, this will cause a lot of amusement, I'm sure, to anyone who goes to Edinburgh regularly and who will know exactly this experience. It did involve, on one occasion, I think, reviewing 8 shows in a day, which is incredibly. You have to take a lot of notes. And also, anybody who knows Edinburgh is that it is very wet and very cold a lot of the time. Well, even in summer. So it was quite interesting. But I knew that we had immediately to put content onto the site, and I knew that would attract other writers, which it did. And eventually, over the years, I think we had I did count them, about 100 writers over the years.
100 writers.
Yeah, and they all absolutely fantastic people and so on. But round about the end of that first year, I sat down with Rupert Kinglyside, who was writing for News Review at that point, and also was a very experienced publisher on the internet to do with business to business. And David Bickerstaff, who was no friend, and he used to, he very kindly sourced all of the champagne for the awards. We would give a bottle of champagne to each person. And we sat down and we said, okay, right, what does a magazine, an online magazine, do next? And we realized it had to be awards, that awards was the obvious thing. And without sounding ridiculous, I actually would base the concept on the Oscars, because the Oscars, I mean, we think of it as being a massive over the top thing, but the Oscars is
quite simple,
founded on a very, very kind principle that absolutely everybody involved in the production of movies can win an award.
Yeah.
So there's no difference between the actors and the backhouse staff and the editors and all that. Every single person is available for an award. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted the cleaner of the Canal Cafe, or the cleaner of some West End theatre, or somebody who to be able to be equally on a par with the people who are delivering the acting and the direction and so on. Because the nature of fringe theatres is that they involve all of those people to make it work.
Of course.
So with the Fringe Report Awards, we made a number of decisions. One was that there should be a particular citation on the person's award, or the company's award, or whatever it was, which should say precisely why the award was being given, and what was special about that person or that show or that company or whatever it was. The other thing is we decided that the awards must always be free. Okay, if people had to pay for their drinks if they wanted to, but no one was compelled to do anything like that. There was no entry fee, and that anyone could come, subject to the size of the venue. So that was the second thing. The third thing was that we decided to fix the number of awards. There would always be 25 awards every year, so that everyone at all times would know that was the format of it. And the fourth thing, which I think was maybe the most important, was that we would always announce the awards well before the actual award ceremony. And the thing that I really hate about award ceremonies when people don't know, and they show the picture of the person looking brokenhearted or whatever, and that kind of thing and so on.
It's a bit cruel, isn't it?
It's horrible. It's really vindictive and nasty. And that's totally against what people involved in the Fringe are doing. They actually, it's a very kind of
communal.
It's a communal thing, but it's also people. There's a kind of conception that actors are kind of spoiled, bitchy people. They're not. they're very, very well balanced to start with, and they really do help each other. So, and I would notice that and people said this all the time about those awards, it's a really friendly night.
Oh, it's the best night ever, John.
There's no tension in the room.
John,
that's the point.
I love those nights.
They were
such fun. They were such fun. For me, they were just liberating and free and fun. And it's so rare to get so many actors, writers, producers, directors, dancers, comedians, artists, poets, filmmakers in one room and create that communal energy and spirit of supportiveness. Really, it was an absolute testament to you, John, and your generosity of spirit. Actually, there was no competition. We were there to celebrate art, and it was a beautiful night. Always, every time, we all left on a high.
I think that it's very nice of you to say that, of course. But I think that it really comes from the kind of people who are involved, and certainly the awards nights were incredibly good fun. I mean, it was very obvious that people were enjoying them. Probably incredibly good fun because I kept my speaking to the absolute minimum, unlike the sort of ordeal that I'm imposing on any listeners now.
John, we may only have 5 or 6 listeners.
Oh, well, that's fine. Good. Well,
but they will really appreciate this.
Well, you dear 5 and 6, don't feel that you have to appreciate it. No, I think that God, I've lost the thread again. Where were we?
We were talking about.
You got to tell the truth, by the way.
Communal.
Not communal laboratories. No.
Communal spirit amongst how
getting drunk.
It wasn't even about getting drunk. It was your award ceremonies created a communal spirit versus the divisive spirit of other award ceremonies that single out loss.
Yes, exactly. I think it's, well, I would say the communal spirit actually comes from the people who are in the audience and the people who are receiving the awards. We had, but yes, absolutely. I don't like that thing about, all that tension.
Do I get another alpha for listening?
Yes, that was quite a good one.
A touch of, as my old English teacher would say, a touch of alpha.
A touch of alpha.
But it was a B double plus.
Was that the famous one who taught you about Jenny Kissner?
No, that was another amazing English teacher.
I looked at that poem. You better tell what we're talking about.
Well, we had at school we had a supply teacher come in, and he was called Father Gamble, and when you look him up, he's sort of got this incredibly colourful background. But I remember him. He came in with a trilby and an overcoat, and he had his like vicar's dog collar on. And one of the first things he said to us was, "Has anyone seen The Exorcist?" And we're like, "Yeah." He goes, "That's me." But more of that later. I mean, he was he used to do exorcisms, but he threw away one term. He was only with us for a term at school, and he'd been brought out of retirement, the Reverend Peter Gamble, and he threw out the curriculum. He said, all we're going to do is learn poems and write short stories, and you will always remember me. And he was right. So yeah, I know lots of poems because of him, like Jenny Kiss Me.
There's a very interesting thing about, because after you told me about that poem, the poem is called Jenny Kiss Me, and it's 200 years old, is it, or 150, something like that. I looked it up, and I looked it up on Wiki, kind of very basic thing. But what was very interesting was that I think, and I may have misunderstood this, that there's a family, and it's a vicar's wife who is the model for Jenny, or whatever, and she kisses the man who writes the poem. I mean, this is the real life thing.
Yeah.
But the point is, he's just recovered from, I think it's cholera or something like that. So it's terribly relevant to the present situation. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
The significance of the kiss.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't infected, but it was actually a demonstration.
What I'll do is I'll do a little editor's interjection here, and then I'll find a recording of Jenny Kiss Me.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And then I'll play it to the listeners. Editor's interjection. Jenny Kiss Me is a poem by Leigh Hunt, first published in 1838. He wasn't really recognised as a poet. He is a very interesting character. Like John himself, a founder of a publication. Hunt co-founded The Examiner, a leading intellectual journal of the time. He was at the centre of the Hampstead-based group The Hunt Circle and introduced the likes of John Keats, Percy Shelley, Robert Browning and Alfred Lord Tennyson to the public. So, a connector of sorts. Jenny Kiss Me was written during a flu epidemic, I kid you not, and refers to an unexpected visit by the recovered Hunt. He'd literally got over the 1830s version of our current COVID, and out of splendid isolation, he visited his neighbour Thomas Carlyle, the poet and author. Jenny was the nickname of Carlyle's wife, Jane Carlyle. Such is the response when breaking social distancing and isolation. A timely poem. I reached out to Twitter for a reader, and the wonderfully talented actress Mina Anwar came forward. Mina, thank you. Over to you for the most gorgeous rendition of Jenny Kiss Me. And if you're up there, Father Gamble, thank you for inspiring us all. We do indeed remember you.
Jenny kissed me when we met, jumping from the chair she sat in. Time, you thief, who loved to get sweets into your list, put that in. Say I'm weary, say I'm sad, say that health and wealth have missed me. Say I'm growing old, but add, Jenny kissed me.
We were talking about the awards ceremony in the spirit, and actually the reflection of Fringe Report. It was what I loved about the Fringe Report reports were that they understood what emerging artists were going through, what it is to be a young artist, or not even a young artist, but someone who's starting off in art, someone who's starting to write or explore. These are the very first tender steps towards exploration of oneself, of life. And what I loved about Fringe Report versus the typical criticism that we were sort of grew up with, the pages of the Standard and the Times, was that it understood the artist, actually, and it stood alongside the artist. And this is what made those reports, for me, so special. They weren't sitting in judgment, supporting the artist's journey. That's the power of the Fringe for me. The power of the Fringe is that without the Fringe, you don't get Fleabag, for example. You don't get Harold Pinter. The Fringe is absolutely vital to the art. And what I loved about Fringe Report was that it understood that and it nurtured. It was a nurturer. Does that resonate, John?
I think that, yes, I think one of the difficulties that print, well, particularly print organizations face, is that it's very impractical for them to cover short runs, so they can't really, it's very difficult for them to cover things that are on for a couple of nights, which is quite typical of Fringe productions. Because of just the physical business of print, but also the physical business of assembling a website now. So they kind of are in a bit of a difficult position. I think that the stage was always good. The stage also did very fair reviews. Their editor, their really wonderful editor for many years, is Brian Atwood, who became an incredibly good friend. Brian Atwood is, first of all, an exceptionally nice man, very, very good man altogether. Secondly, an utterly brilliant editor. And from time to time with Fringe Report, the question, I don't know if you remember, but sometime during that 10 years, I think it was a restaurant review, and I think it was in Northern Ireland, and the restaurateur sued for libel.
Sued who?
Sued the reviewer for libel for the restaurant review.
In which publication?
I don't know what it was, but it was some publication in I think in Northern Ireland, and obviously their law kind of applies to Britain as well. So suddenly everybody got rather concerned that this could apply to theatrical reviews or any review at all. I don't know what the case ended up doing, but obviously not much because people are still as frank in reviews as they were. But one of the great things about Brian Atwood at the stage was that I think he'd initially seen websites or the theatrical establishment, of which the stage is obviously a key element, had seen websites as being a threat. But I was very kindly invited to the stage's annual party, which was a terrific way of meeting people, meeting actors, meeting other people involved in West End theatre, many of whom were also doing stuff in the Fringe. But the stage very quickly embraced Fringe theatre and does a very particular kind of review, really, from the point of view of the profession, the theatrical profession itself, but also whatever. But also, Brian was incredibly kind to me on Fringe Report and just informal advice about issues like libel and stuff, which can really torpedo organisations.
No, there were some good people out there. And good organisations.
Time
for sure.
Out was
were
doing
great.
outstanding comedy reviews, and they were trying to cover as much Fringe as they could.
Yeah.
The Evening Standard actually provided some good coverage, and the Guardian, of course, would try wherever possible to do that. And I think local papers, well, particularly really outstanding periodical, the Camden New Journal, that did superb reviews of small theatres in that area. And there were other local ones that did that. So there were plenty of people trying to do this.
Do the supportive.
But they are constrained by having to sell a newspaper and therefore do things which are compellingly interesting. It's just pre-filming on a phone, but you could get a cheap 100 quid to 150 quid movie camera.
Yeah.
And you could do cinema quality film.
Yeah. HD.
And
was
then
kind of kicked in
get
around
free editing software.
All of that.
So that was because we started covering, for example, the Edinburgh Film Festival, then later the London Film Festival. So we're talking about theatre, but we're also talking about art, about books, about dance, particularly dance, poetry.
Yeah, I loved everything about the Fringe Report. The reason I preferred it to the other emerging websites that eventually made you realise the Fringe was being covered anyway was it didn't try to win. It didn't try to win readers. It wasn't trying to win over readers. It wasn't selling itself. It just was. Here is the report of this piece of work. And it wasn't in the review trying to go, here, let's get more readers to our website to boost traffic, to sell banner ads, to make money. Your Fringe Report, because it was run on a shoestring or an elusive shoestring of sorts.
That's probably the title for this podcast, The Elusive Shoestring, yes.
Yeah, because it wasn't run, because it was run for nothing. Yes, there were costs to your awards and certain costs, like there were mainly expenses. You weren't trying to create a website that was on the treadmill of how do we get more viewers to our website? How do we sell more banner advertising? How do we make more money? It just was this pure thing. Even the typeface was just black and white. It was just a black. There was no color on it. It was just black text on a white background with it was a report. It was such a beautiful thing aesthetically as well, I thought, and it just stood out for me. And it's such a shame it's not there anymore. And I will be visiting the British Library to view. I will do it, John. I'm going to go one afternoon and I'm going to get that book out and I'm going to read some reports from 2002 to 3.
Well, and if you wait for a while, there'll be others. Funnily enough, the listeners may know a thing called the Drudge Report, run by a journalist called Matt Drudge, which is I don't know what it's like now. It was a highly anarchic site then, and the Drudge Report just had Courier typeface and
was your typeface was Courier, wasn't it?
I copied Matt Drudge's layout.
Oh, brilliant!
Our front page always used to be 3 columns like his, and then then you could get all the reviews, all the content on the first page. Because the thing that always really pissed me off, and I'm sure many other people, is a website that is so entangled within itself that you've no idea. So our front page was actually what the Times used to be in the 50s. It was just columns with type.
John, I'd like to thank you for joining me today on this podcast. It's been really wonderful listening to you talk about Fringe Report, and it's revived my own memories of the Fringe Report. Can we finish up with you saying a few final words?
I'd certainly, I think, like to thank to thank all of the people who have been involved. That's all the audiences and all the actors and all of the filmmakers and dancers and comedians and artists, obviously. To pick out just one or two people, to thank very much Emma Taylor for being very much at the origin of Fringe Report, and Rohan Acharya at the Canal Cafe Theatre. To Martin Witts and Leslie Ackland, the owners of the Leicester Square Theatre, who've been just absolutely wonderful all the way through. The people involved in the awards, Richard Dragon, David Beckerstaff, Rupert Keanyside, and then to our actual people creating Fringe Report, Michael Spring, who edited the WordPress site that we had, Catherine Badovich, who's also the editor of Frost magazine, who was the editor for the MySpace page when we had that, and Bo Wilson, journalist, and later Josephine Arden, actor, who were the Facebook editors, Wendy Thompson, who was provided marvellous editorial consultancy, Brian Atwood, as mentioned, editor of The Stage, for his constant help, and three very excellent people, Chris Timms and Simon Dale at Blue Compass PLC, and Marcus Markou at Dynamis PLC for their encouragement, support and technical advice, to our anonymous donors who very kindly helped with the awards, and to everyone who designed the mastheads for Fringe Report, and to two marvellous people at the British Library, Stephen Cleary and Eva Del Rey, and for all the people who organised and hosted Fringe Report's first Monday social meetings and other events. There are many, many other people, and it's been fun.
Thank you, John. And that was an extended, extraordinary podcast celebrating the once wonderful Fringe Report and its founder, John Park, who I can report is still wonderful. As we come out of COVID-19, this podcast will now be published bi-monthly, twice a month. And in 2 weeks' time, the charming, chisel-jawed actor Ed Stoppard will be hosting a very special B-Sides with the actor Adrian Scarborough, who has been in so many things, and I will be a little starstruck for his appearances in one of my favourite sitcoms, Gavin and Stacey. We can be found on Spotify and Apple, and a week or so later on YouTube. Thank you for listening, and sweet dreams until we meet again.